Hello, my dears. My name is Joanna, and I'll welcome you to Johanna Takonis, the Deconstruction of CPDS podcast. In this episode, we will talk about trauma again. This time, about where to separate them and when they actually belong together. Because these guys just won't come in matching colors. Sarcasm set aside, it is difficult to distinguish them. It is important though, because this way you know what kind of trauma you are dealing with and how to treat them. So let us talk about it. Sometimes I miss the time when I had the position that no matter the trauma, I either had CPTSD or I was well. I didn't saw a point in distinguishing between the traumas, as it was all PTSD either way, so why bother? But sadly, the more I studied PTSD and the more I discovered, the more I lost oversight, and I had to admit that I at least had to separate the different traumas. It was otherwise just a huge jumbled up mess. And the Achilles heel of PTSD is, as soon as it is fully exposed, it is at its weakest. It is a creature that hides in the darkness and strikes from there, but doesn't really have much of a defense besides that. That is why spreading the information and gaining knowledge is so important. So I will admit that at one point I just stopped counting, because the list was already too ridiculously long and I no longer really needed it. But I do know the struggles of disentangling your own experiences and trying to figure out where and how to place them. I plan a chart, hopefully also a flow chart, and the like for this reason, among other things. Usually the trauma gets separated by the time that passes between them and then what form the trauma took. So we first talk about common versus sporadic, and then how different forms of abuse result in different forms of traumas. So let us start the common versus sporadic segment by repeating what was said in episode 95. A trauma is as long as the situation lasts, even if it takes years, even decades. Also, multiple traumas can happen at the same time. More to that in the second part. We are solely focusing on the time aspect for now. So the trauma lasts as long as the situation holds on and you are affected by it actively, like being in an abusive relationship. But what about the abuse, you might wonder? You usually don't experience the abuse non-stop. This is where we need to separate between common and sporadic, which is interestingly enough depending on the interpretation of your brain. But, in general, if it happens on a regular basis, it is common. If the insults come daily, it is common. If the violent outbursts are here and there, then it is sporadic, and would just be added to the cluster that is an abusive relationship. I would even go so far to say that once a week is borderline to sporadic. The key question is, do you remember a type of abuse as being a regularly and common experience? Or is it more something that happened sporadically? If it is the second, then each sporadic event counts as its own thing, be it a small ball trauma or a small ball in the cluster. Which leads us to the second segment, in which we talk about the different form of abuse that result in different form of traumas. We first separate between a dangerous situation and actions of a person. A life-threatening situation is traumatic, and as longer it lasts, the bigger the trauma gets. As long as the threat remains, the situation is still ongoing, as it is the traumatic experience. The same goes for abusive relationships, or any traumatic situation. If we stay in the abusive relationship, then having your life under threat at all times and the abusive relationship itself are two different traumas. If it is an occasional threat to the own life or yours, it belongs either to the trauma or it is its own separate thing. There is a different trauma for violent abuse as it is for a verbal one. They each belong to their own category, as does neglect and abandonment. Everything that damages the soul in a different way is its own trauma, even if both ways are via violence. A slap on the hand and a punch on the face are very different levels of threat, on a baseline. In context, a slap on the hand can be a death threat. So the key in the separation of the violence is, the theme they fall under, which once again your brain decides. Examples of the themes are life-threatening, threatening, reminder to stay in line, punishment, part of the daily interactions, and so many more. The important part is how you perceive those actions against you and if you can put them into one group. So to recap, we separate traumas depending how much time passed between experiences and under which theme these experiences happened. That was it for today's episode. I hope you found it helpful. Hope you are safe and well. And as always, if you have any questions or feedback and the like, please let me know at contactme@johannatacoins.com. More information and transcript you can find as usually under johannatacoins.com/podcast. Information regarding therapy you can find under johannatacoins.com/therapy and links in the description. I hope to see you next time. Watch yourself and have a wonderful time.